David Farrow.
I'm Scott Cason.
And you're listening to the Charleston Times. Okay. We have with us today candidate for the 1st Congressional District primary, Teddy Turner. And Teddy, welcome to the show, man. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dave and Scott. I'm happy to be here.
All right. Well, Teddy, what has possessed you, buddy? What possessed you to go out there and do this?
Well, you know, after teaching economics for a couple years and spending a lot of time working in youth development, leadership training, and that kind of stuff, I just felt that, you know, we weren't really moving in the right direction. We weren't getting as many kids through high school as we can. We're not supporting small business. Politicians are giving us a lot of double talk. I just thought, you know, it's time to try to get something done and try. If I didn't do something, I thought I'd regret it the rest of my life.
Well, I understand that completely. So you said, what is your main thing you want to accomplish by being elected?
Well, the biggest problem we have, and we all know this, and we all should be very aware of it, of course, is the national debt. We can't just keep piling up debt. You can't borrow your way into prosperity. You know, it just doesn't work that way. And so we've got to get a hold on that. But how we got to the debt is the problem, and how we get out of the debt is the bigger problem. So how we got into the debt was lack of accountability in Washington, but how we get out of the debt is by building back small business. So it's a compound of things. You can't separate one from the other, and they all need to be worked on simultaneously.
Hey, Teddy, obviously you're kind of segueing into something that's real important right now. Of course, that's the so-called sequester. We've just heard the president basically throwing out more and more, I don't even, you know,
I think the word would be lies.
Yeah, but I mean, essentially, you know, saying that, you know, the sky is going to fall and
right.
all that.
Scare tactics.
Yeah, and he's the one. Of course, it was his idea to have the sequester. My problem with this, and I want you to comment on this, is that I don't really even see anybody in the Republican leadership calling him on it with any kind of vehemence.
Well, the problem that we have, it's all political drama. And the problem is it's political drama, but it's taxpayer nightmare. So we got a big problem here. Now, sequestration is yes, people say the purists want to say, well, I don't care where the cuts come from as long as they come. And you know what? There's a lot to be said for that. But when the Pentagon says they're going to furlough 800,000 workers, when South Carolina from the Treasurer's office said we're going to lose 30,000 jobs in South Carolina, we only have 185,000 unemployed right now. I mean, that's a big number. And I say only 185,000. Well, it could be 30,000 plus after sequestration. So it's a real problem, but it's political drama. It was set up by the White House. It was set up by that administration. It was set up to make the Republicans look bad, because right now they're going to say, well, if they don't vote to kick the can down the road, if they don't vote to raise the credit ceiling, if they don't do this, and they're the bad guys and they made it happen. It's political theater, and I'm so tired of that, and that's another reason I'm running. It's political double talk.
Well, now, isn't there a way that somebody could sit down and say, okay, we're not going to just chop these jobs, we're going to... I saw a fellow yesterday from California, I think he was head of the Ways and Means Committee, I'm not sure if it was, but he said, why not go in there and make calculated cuts?
Yeah, move around. Or move,
right, or move people around
move
and
some
stuff
of the money,
like that. I mean, to me, this is incredibly drastic. Teddy, the one thing that I see that I'm very concerned about is this whole war, not only on Republicans, but on anybody who disagrees with this administration. I find it alarming. I mean, I've never seen it. Am I wrong? Have I ever seen this before? I don't think I have. Even Richard Nixon Never did anything.
Well, you know, the interesting thing with politics, and we always think, you know, this is the most divisive election ever, and it is because it's the ones that we're living through. I mean, if you look back in history, there was some pretty divisive elections, and there was a lot of hate talk and rhetoric that was going on over the years. However, for us, this is the most important. For us, this is our direct future. So whether it's
and our children,
it is or it isn't, it is to us, and that's what counts.
I would argue with technology and everything else that they've got a much bigger advantage than any other politician ever had before. I mean, this whole turning the whole campaign into a political action committee, I find that alarming. To be
but we should be able to. We as conservatives, we as traditionalists, we should be able to use the same tools. The biggest problem that I find is that being a conservative is not cool. Being a conservative is not hip. But being a liberal, being a crazy liberal, is even more cool.
You're not never met, have you? Because I'm pretty damn cool, Ted.
Well, I think I'm pretty cool too, but I can tell you, there's a lot of people that don't feel that way because, let me tell you, when you tell somebody that you're pro-traditional marriage, people jump. I mean, they go crazy because obviously you're a bigot.
Well, they become a protected class.
Well, you know, the crazy thing is, I was raised in a Presbyterian church, and you know what? At my church, marriage is between a man and a woman. I understand that, and that's what I want to protect. Now, if the government comes to my church and says, you can't do that anymore, you have to do it this way, that's what I'm against. But you know what? If you want to do something, you want to have a contract, you want to have a civil union, whatever it is, a contract between two consenting adults, okay.
Why are you
calling me a bigot?
Right. Well, you know what's amazing to me, too, and while we're on this issue, I mean, to me, people have the right to associate, with freedom of association with whomever they want. That's no problem at all. And if it means cohabitating, the issue of marriage, there's nothing in the Constitution about marriage. The founders didn't say that that marriage is a right. I mean, you know, it is an institution that was first of all started with churches, and then of course later on with local governments. But there's not
actually marriage is older than that. Marriage is one of the oldest institutions.
Absolutely. But I mean, you know, this idea that you have a right to marry is no, you don't. I mean, it's there's nothing.
It's the continuing political theater. If the left and the Obama administration can smokescreen all this stuff and make me look bad or make us look bad, make the Republican Party, the conservatives, whoever, look bad. That's what they've done. They've taken the eye completely off the ball of the public, and they've made us the enemy, and we've played into their hands because we've had some of us say some silly things. But it's just not true. When they're talking to the vast majority of conservatives, agree with the vast majority of everybody, you know, that we want clean water and clean air and hope for our kids and a decent job and be able to make money and be successful and create jobs. That's what we all want.
Hey, Teddy, I'm sorry to interrupt. And I hear you on this, but, you know, we've got a number of other candidates that are running. Some of them will say a lot of the same things. Tell me what you think and what separates you from the other candidates and makes you unique and you think more worthy of holding this office?
Well, worthy is a big word, but I think the difference is, you know, business experience, life experience, travel experience. You know, I lived in the Soviet Union for a couple of years. I've lived in a different culture, not just out of the state or out of the backyard. I've lived in a communist country. I understand that. I've run public companies.
Do me a favor and give me about 2 minutes on that. What was it like living in a communist country?
Well, I can tell you, the Soviet Union is the darkest, scariest, meanest place that I'd ever been in my whole life. I mean, the people...
Of course, you've never been to North Korea.
The people were wonderful. The government was so oppressive, it was unbelievable. So when we talk about socialism, when we talk about government creating jobs, and you know, if the government created jobs, the Soviet Union would be the richest country in the world. And you know what? It failed. because government doesn't create jobs. So I spent, my scariest part was, I was a cameraman and editor. I just finished doing a bunch of stories on Soviet medicine, which is the world's biggest oxymoron, and same shit, socialized medicine is the same way. But I was in a big car wreck. And I broke all the bones in my face, knocked out all my bottom teeth. Jesus. I was in a non-life-threatening situation until I got to the facial hospital of the Soviet Union. Until they wired my jaws together, but yet my nose was broken, my lips were swollen, my jaws were wired together, and I had swallowed tons of blood, and they knew that. I don't know if you've ever tried to throw up with your jaws wired together, but I can tell you, not only hurts, but it's very, very difficult. And so there was no call buttons, no nurses on the station. If I hadn't knocked out some of my teeth to get the solids out, I would have died. It was glass and steel syringes, reusable IV bags in the middle of the AIDS scare. Hepatitis C ran rampant. So my life was then taken in my hands. But you know what? I didn't get a bill, but I also didn't get an MRI or a CAT scan. I mean, I was in the facial hospital of the Soviet Union. They didn't have a straw.
Well, I bet you they had plenty of vodka, though.
They had plenty of vodka. That is very true.
Are you? Would you say that that's kind of in the long run, not tomorrow morning, but in the long run, once Obamacare gets in, say 10 years, that's pretty much what we've got to look forward to?
It's exactly what we have to look forward to. What's going to happen is it's going to be somewhat of the European style, and you're going to have a two-tiered system. You're going to have the people that can afford real health insurance and go to a real hospital, and there's going to be everybody else. And the everybody else system is going to be awful. It's going to make the VA look like the Four Seasons. And it's just, people don't realize that if you don't earn something, it's not worth anything. And if it's free, you get no value. So we cannot let the government take over this system. But guess what? They already did. Now we got to figure out how to dismantle it. Now we got to figure out how do you hijack 16% of the national economy, but don't touch tort reform. You know why? Because lawyers run Washington. If the biggest expense in medicine right now is malpractice, is lawyers, is insurance. That's the biggest expense.
But we also see, there's already parts of it that are unraveling. I mean, now we also know this thing about the pre-existing conditions. And I don't know if this is a positive thing. I'm somewhat of a semi-optimistic person in the sense that I think that if things really start unraveling at the point that they are, and if, of course, in reference to you, there's a change in Congress, there might be some positive aspect of this from the standpoint of either defunding or changing parts of it that, because I don't see any other thing happening other than this thing just completely backfiring in a lot of ways.
Well, I understand, we all do what they were trying to do, right? We understand that we want people to have the ability to access health care. I get that. It sounds good. That's what politicians pass, laws that sound good. Let's pass it. Don't read it. We'll figure it out afterwards. Anybody that voted for this thing should be embarrassed.
No, they should be taken out and shot.
No.
But
he's joking.
Kind of.
But we have, there are things, parts that we understand that we need to look at. But the government, the plan here is to put the insurance companies out of business.
Yep.
The plan is to put private health care out of business, which they'll never do because there will always be wealthy people that have private health care. But it will become much more limited. They will take out all the competition. They will take out all the malpractice suits because you won't be able to sue the government when they cut your wrong leg off. This is a hijacking of the people's state, the creating of the people's state, the hijacking of our freedoms so that they can dole out more entitlements.
Well, Teddy, I want to, we could go on that for weeks. Teddy, okay. I want to kind of change the shift a little bit. You were in the Soviet Union. Of course, I believe now Russia, frankly, I don't think the Soviet Union ever went away. But now,
not really, no.
I would argue that Russia may be one of our biggest problems, and we're just ignoring it right now. I mean, they're giving Iran and Syria all kinds of support, and we're like, oh, well, how about that? Our good buddies, the Russians. On foreign policy itself, if you could spend about 2 or 3 minutes explaining how you would deal with foreign policy, I think a lot of people would be interested in knowing that.
Right. Well, one of the things, we've got some huge problems. I did spend some time in Afghanistan. I've seen radical Islam, in its face. We all have after 9/11. We have some serious issues. We have people out there who hate us. We have people out there that would kill us in a skinny minute. So we have to be very defensive. And sometimes part of the best part of a defense is a really good offense. And so I don't think we need to stand around waiting for somebody to actually pull a trigger before we go do something. When the threat is there, it's strong enough, we may have to step in. It is a tragedy. We don't want to spend trillions of dollars doing this, and we don't want to waste one human life on our side or their side if it can be done otherwise. But some people, just don't talk sense. You can't talk a bully out of being a bully.
Absolutely.
That just doesn't work.
Teddy, you mentioned, I'm sorry because we don't have much time on your side or ours, but I want to ask you this. In terms of protection, like for instance, the National Defense Authorization Act, where it basically gives the president the right to suspend not only posse comitatus, which is, of course, using U.S. troops on U.S. soil against U.S. citizens, but also habeas corpus. And
right.
I'm a bit alarmed at how, it's very easy. Oh, look, we had an attack. We better suspend civil rights. How do you see that happening? I mean, what can protect us against that?
What's going on is terrifying, and it should be. And our founding fathers, if they were alive today, they'd obviously be very, very old, but they would be very pissed off. And they had...
Well, they say the two go together.
They would be very upset because, of course, they could have never envisioned this kind of abuse of power because they were the staunchest advocates of limited government the world had ever seen. And now we have this huge, bloated, fat government. I mean, the Homeland Security just ordered, 7,000 AR-15s or M16s?
Well, they're buying up all the ammo. That's the part that gets
Didn't they get them from Mexico? I'm sorry.
No.
I mean, right. Well, you got to keep your programs going,
Yeah, that's right.
Teddy, I want to ask you, I'm sorry to... I'm throwing this in because we have our Ron Paul types, and there's a lot of things I liked about Ron Paul, but one thing was his foreign policy, and essentially his foreign policy was we need to forget about the rest of the world. It's none of our business if Iran gets nukes. It's not, essentially a hands-off thing. It's a lot of this was our fault anyway, and this is what caused the world to hate us. Comment on that a little bit.
Well, my theory there is pretty simple. If I had gotten to the United States 300 years ago, and I had walked out somewhere and built my cabin and said, you know what, I'm not going to put up any defenses because I'm not going to piss anybody off. I'm just going to sit here and mind my own business. I'm going to grow my own crops. I'm going to take care of myself. I'm going to build me a little business. I'm going to raise my family. Everybody'd say, that guy's an idiot.
Well, or he was on the show Bonanza.
Yeah. I guess one thing, and then we're limited time, but one thing I always want to ask people like Ron Paul and a local guy here who is a big supporter of his is if you had that attitude, how would you have responded to what was going on in Europe in the 1930s? I mean, would you just said, which we did, of course, but I mean, unfortunately, would you have just said let Hitler, even after before even if Pearl Harbor had not happened, would you just let him go ahead and take over the rest of Europe? And it's not bothering us, but, you know.
That is not to me, that is not the American way of life. That's not the American mentality. We want justice and freedom, but it's justice and freedom for all. And I don't see that as just being, that just means us. If we can help people, if we can promote democracy, if we can promote freedom, you know what? And that makes us safe and helps free other people. I mean, I don't think we go nuts about it, but I think we certainly need to promote it. And you know what? We cannot afford to not have a defense. We have to be defensive. But if we are the world's police, which we are, then we have to be the world's police. Everybody hates the policemen until you need them. Then everybody loves them. And it's the same way with America. When we go and do something good, when we removed Saddam Hussein from Kuwait, we were heroes.
Yeah, absolutely. Teddy, we've only got about a minute left. I want to give you a closing statement, as it were.
Yes, sir.
Again, why you, as opposed to, say, Mark Sanford or Chip Limehouse or who is it, Larry Grooms, really?
Well, one of the things, and I can make it a two-part process, because it's why me and why not them. And why me, different perspective. I see the world in a different way. I understand business, not just small business. We hear people talk about signing the front of paychecks. You know, I ran public companies. And I started a company in North Charleston with 3 guys in a toolbox. So it's not just big business. I've done big business and small business. I've done corporate America. I've done the whole gambit, and I understand it. Teaching economics, understanding economics, learning about economics, that's important. Life experience of what you did with your time and your money, that's important. We need a different look. Now, why not them? Why not them because they're politicians? Why not them because they tell you they're cutting your taxes? Why not them because they tell you they're saving you money? They tell you they're cutting budgets, and you know what? They're not. They have to balance the budget by state law. I didn't speed on the way over here. I'm at school today. I didn't speed on the way over here. Do I get a credit for that? No, that's the law. These guys will tell you one thing and do another. Larry Grooms is sporting a $500 million transportation bond to bypass the way the state government works, to put that burden on the taxpayers. These guys in Columbia, one, haven't done their job to begin with. They were in office for 45 days before they decided to run for the next office, and they're the only people that can keep their jobs while they're doing this. One, that's shameful. And the bond thing, bypassing government, adding debt, they've added $16.5 million of deficit to the state through unfunded liabilities, but they're supposed to have a balanced budget. You can't. How do you not include unfunded liabilities in a budget? Not as a business, you couldn't do that. It would have to be on your balance sheet.
Well,
these guys don't understand what they're doing, and they will do
what
anything.
What scares me is that they do.
What
is it Reagan said? One quote that Reagan said about, this is a little different, but he says, and I'm talking about liberals, he said, it's not that liberals are ignorant, it's just what they say isn't so.
Well, I think Margaret Thatcher said at one point, you're going to run out of other people's money.
Yeah.
So in closing, leadership, accountability, trust. You have to be able to send up somebody up there that you can trust, will look out for your best interest, not their own, will stand there watch until they're properly relieved, and aren't going to lie to you. I've had enough of politicians. It's ridiculous. We need something different.
Well, Teddy, thank you so much for coming on with us. We really appreciate it. As I said, you're going to be our debut show. So we're very excited to have it. That was kind of interesting, don't you think?
Yeah, and one of the things, and I think it is refreshing, is that, Teddy's not a politician, and most of the rest of them that are running are. And I found that pretty intriguing. I guess probably
he's not slick,
right?
But you know what? I like that. I like that. The other reason that I find him interesting, and of course, it's the same thing with me. You know, I had no business, ran for mayor. I had no business running for mayor. I'd never been a politician, and it's a hell of an education. And I understand the call, though, is what I'm saying. I understand the need to put yourself out there. And I admire him for doing it. Whether he does anything, how do you think his chances are going to be?
Well, one thing it does seem like, and again, we're talking politics, he does seem to have a good treasure chest. He's doing good ads, and there's a lot of his ads on there. They're pretty good ads. I mean,
Excellent ads.
They seem to do good. Probably, maybe a little disagreement with him on foreign policy. I don't see us personally as policemen of the world. I see us as looking out for our interest, and certainly the Middle East is our interest.
Right.
His point is whether you don't. I don't know if it's his point, but I can understand whether you don't see us as policemen of the world. We probably are, I guess, but it's not something I would like to see us be. But so from that standpoint, I believe that American foreign policy is based on our interest. And I mean our interest to our country, and certainly what happens in the Middle East, what happens in Iran, what happens
doesn't stay in the Middle East.
Yeah. Well, especially when you're dealing with oil. I mean, right now we have leaders in Washington we have no energy policy, which we could do, and
tomorrow.
Yeah.
I guess it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see. Hopefully, we'll have by the time the primary comes, we'll have at least 5 or 6 more interviews.
Yeah.
With people. It'd be really cool if they returned our calls. Anyway, thank you very much, Scott.
Absolutely.
And next week we're going to try a little something. I'm going to be in Fort Myers, Florida, looking at the Red Sox training camp.
Oh, you lucky dog.
I am a lucky dog.
You're a Red Sox fan.
With a really hot chick, too, so it doesn't get better than that. But we're going to try a little something. We're going to do the same thing that we did today, except I'll be in Florida, and oh my God, you'll be here.
Yes.
So really want to thank you.
Absolutely.
All right, I'm David Farrow.
I'm Scott Cason.
And you're listening to the Charleston Times.